We are now live.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're delighted to have you with us this afternoon. UWI Press, members of the board, including Chairman Dr. Luz Longsworth, Ms. Maureen Thompson, Director General, Jamaica Library Service, specially invited guests, family and friends of the authors, members of the media, viewers joining us via the UWI Press YouTube channel. And it's also lovely to have students of AISK watching. This is their virtual field trip. I will introduce the distinguished participants throughout the program. We're here to celebrate the launch of Lorna Downs and Thelma Baker's very welcome roadmap to the teaching of literature, with the Caribbean's brightest stars shining the way. This publication, Caribbean Writers on Teaching Literature, is not only instructive, but also a colorful, brilliant read. Only recently, Megan Schmidt wrote in the Discover magazine an article headlined, "How Reading Fiction Increases Empathy and Encourages Understanding." She says that in a recent study by University of Toronto's Professor Keith Oakley and colleagues, they found that the more names of fiction authors that participants knew, the higher they scored in empathy tests. We see this publication enriching the teaching of literature, not only in the Caribbean, but making its mark worldwide. Now remember, there is a special launch discount. The promo code will be shared with you throughout this event, and it will be valid until the end of this month. And now I would like to invite Ms. Kelly Williams, who will give the welcome. Ms. Williams is the marketing officer at the UWI Press. She has represented the UWI Press at conferences nationally, regionally, and internationally. She has expert knowledge of event planning and website development and maintenance in collaboration with marketing and sales manager, Ms. Donna Muirhead. Ms. Williams has worked on numerous book launches and has served on the Kingston Book Festival Executive Planning Committee. Ms. Williams.
A pleasant afternoon to all our viewers, and thank you for joining us. The Board of Directors, Management and Staff welcome you to the virtual launch of Caribbean Writers on Teaching Literature by Lorna Down and Thelma Baker. We congratulate our authors and invite you to purchase your copy at a special 30% discount from our website, www.uipress.com.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. We now invite Dr. Marcia Rainford to bring greetings. She's currently the director of the School of Education at the University of the West Indies, Mona, and a senior lecturer in science education. She's a pragmatic, dedicated, and caring teacher educator with a passion for teaching, for deep learning, and an avid advocate for student-centered instruction. She has a PhD in science education from the UWI, and her career spans 40 years in the field of education. She taught chemistry at the secondary level for 13 years, served as science educator and team leader for the reform of secondary education in service teacher training program, and was a chief examiner at the Caribbean Examinations Council for CSEC chemistry. Her main research interests are in the areas of teacher, professional development, and formative assessment. Dr. Marcia Rainford.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And it really is a pleasure to be here this afternoon. I want to especially congratulate our two authors, Lorna Down and Thelma Baker, for this very important publication. And the whole idea of creating a document, a book that speaks to how to teach literature, hearing from the voice of experts, must indeed be a very, very important feat that you have undertaken and accomplished. And so perhaps at this time, Thelma and Lorna, you may be experiencing some amount of relief, perhaps even some anxiety, but that's okay. I submit, however, that there should be a very high level of satisfaction at this, on this your accomplishment. So on behalf of the School of Education, I'm very pleased to be here and to be bringing greetings at this function. You would have heard that my background is in science education. And as I went through the book, I really could identify with being the kind of student who might have given some teachers a little bit of a challenge, because I, at one point, thought that it might not be such a good thing to be compelled to do literature when I was doing my O levels. And I really want to thank at this time publicly the Great Excelsior High School for insisting that this was done, and also to thank my teacher, Carmen Sanguinetti, who demonstrated, as I have read from some of the aspects of this book, that it is important to have a good teacher who can make you make that transition to one who just does a subject because it has to be done, to one who really loves it. And in fact, I did graduate top of my class, with literature being my actually the best subject that I have done. So I'm really happy for that. And I'm really happy as well that what this book has done is that it has served to strengthen the connection between the two departments, School of Education and the Department of Literatures in English. But more importantly, it provides teachers with insights on how to teach literature, as they can draw on the information using the voices and the experiences of so many great Caribbean experts from the field of practice. It is rich in its breadth and scope, spanning these three generations of Caribbean writers. And I want to just, continue to commend you and to give you my heartiest congratulations to the writers. Have a good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rainford. And now we invite Dr. Rachel Mosley-Wood, who is the Senior Lecturer and Head of the Department of Literatures and English at UWI-Mona, to address us. She teaches primarily in the department's Film Studies program. Her primary research interest is Caribbean cinema, and she is the author of the 2019 book, Show Us As We Are, Place, Nation, and Identity in Jamaican Film, the first scholarly monograph on Jamaican cinema. Rachel has also published a number of essays on Jamaican and Caribbean diaspora cinema in regional and international journals. Outside the classroom, she has worked assiduously to establish the Mona campus as a space that facilitates conversations and exchanges between regional filmmakers and their audiences. To this end, she has organized several film events at Mona and led the faculty initiative to host the Africa World Documentary Film Festival. Rachel was Associate Dean, Marketing and Outreach in the Faculty of Humanities and Education previously. Thank you. Please address us, Dr. Rachel Mosley-Wood.
Thank you, Jean, and hello, everyone. Good afternoon, greetings, and my heartiest congratulations to Drs. Lorna Down and Thelma Baker on the publication of this excellent book, Caribbean Writers on Teaching Literature. I must say that I was very excited when I got my copy, and I eagerly look forward to reading it. As a sometimes teacher of literature, and I say sometimes because as Jean stated, I teach primarily in the department's film studies program, but I do teach literature courses in the department occasionally. So I was eager to find out how some of the most highly regarded and respected teachers of literature in the region responded to the perennial question that the interviewers posed. How do you approach the teaching of literature? In essence, what is the key to what you do in the classroom? And what intensified this excitement on my part is that I personally know many of the teachers interviewed. And in fact, I'm very proud to say that of the 18 interviewees, I counted 7 who are either former or current member of the Department of Literature and English. And if we expand that definition of member to graduates, that number grows. And in fact, some of the persons interviewed in the book taught me literature. So I've sat in some of their classrooms and benefited from some of the ideas and approaches that they discuss in the book. So the book had a very kind of personal meaning beyond the academic importance of it and the scholarly impact. It felt personal to me. I think that the book also speaks to the impact and influence of the department and the impact it has had over the past 5 decades on the teaching of literature in the region, and the rich legacy the department can claim in terms of encouraging the love of literature and the love of reading in successive generations of students. As I said, one of the reasons that I look forward to reading this book was to learn how these eminent and successful teachers approach the teaching of literature. I was looking for tips, strategies that I too could adopt and use to improve the quality of my own teaching and the experience of students in my classroom. The book did not disappoint on this score. Each interviewer spoke frankly and in detail about how they approach the business of teaching, from the performative style of Edward Baugh, one of the interviewees in the first generation of Caribbean teachers, right through to Norval Edwards, one of those among the third generation who sees himself as a facilitator rather than the conductor of the orchestra. There is much here that is of interest and of value to those of us who teach, and not simply to those of us who teach literature. I think anyone involved in teaching any subject will find this book useful and, yes, inspiring. For as Mervyn Morris states in his interview, teaching is not about subjects as much as it is about people. I'm particularly pleased that Dr. Victor Chang was one of the teachers interviewed in this book. Dr. Chang, who died in 2019, was a former member of the Department of Literatures in English at Mona, and he was a most beloved lecturer. And while he has left behind a wealth of critical articles and some short stories, I'm really grateful for the interview in this book in which he speaks in his own words about his work as a lecturer at UWI, a role through which he has touched hundreds of lives. I want to congratulate the authors for providing this book, which gives such important insight into the teaching of literature and which brings welcome attention to the work we do in the department and defines that work as critical to our students' lives. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Rachel. The names of our 4 contributors speak volumes, pardon the pun. When I introduce them shortly, you will see that they have in common a passion for literature and an unremitting dedication to presenting master classes. Now, remember to write your questions during the presentations in the chat room along with your name, and then at the end of the readings, I will pose them on your behalf. Now we will have a commentary on this wonderful publication by Rachel Mayer Boxill. She has been an educator for the past 22 years. She did her undergraduate and graduate studies in literatures in English and education at UWI-Mona. Her graduate thesis was entitled Narrating AIDS, Caribbean Literary Representations of the New Disease. She was a course coordinator and tutor at the Open Campus, UWI, lectured at the University College of the University of the Caribbean, tutored in the Department of Literatures in English, and also lectured at the Edna Manley College of the Visual and Performing Arts. At present, Mrs. Mayer Boxill has been trained by the International Baccalaureate and currently teaches literature and theory of knowledge at the American International School of Kingston. Rachel Boxill. We seem to have a little technical difficulty there, so we will proceed with the program. Now to the reading by Professor Edward Bowe, Professor Emeritus of English, UWI-Mona, and my beloved professor. Born in Port Antonio, Jamaica, he attended Titchfield High School, the University College of the West Indies, Queen's University, Canada, and the University of Manchester, England. He joined the faculty of the University of the West Indies at the Barbados campus in 1965 and transferred to Mona in 1968, from where he retired in 2001. His three collections of poetry are A Tale from the Rainforest, Sandbury Press, It Was the Singing, Sandbury Press, and Black Sand, New and Selected Poems, People Tree Press. Two compact discs of him reading his poems have been produced. Edward Bowe, Poems from It Was the Singing, New Jersey Intermedia Foundation, and Edward Bowe reading from his poems, the Poetry Archive of Great Britain. As a literary scholar and critic, he has earned a reputation for his work on the Nobel laureate, Derek Walcott. He edited Walcott's selected poems, and his Derek Walcott biography was published by the UW Press in 2017. His many honors and awards include the Jamaica National Honor of Commander of the Order of Distinction, an honorary Doctor of Literature's degree from the UWI, and a Gold Musgrave Medal from the Institute of Jamaica. Professor Edward Bowe.
Thanks, Jean. It seems like a very long time ago that I did my interview. And looking back now, I don't think I had much of an idea of what the scope of this book would be. What is more, after a time, I began to wonder if the book would indeed be published. Now that I have it in my hands, I give thanks and congratulations. Not only is it attractive to look at, it is also substantial and engaging in the best sense. There have been many, maybe numberless books over the years about the teaching of literature, books in the expected textbook format, but a book in which the ideas on such teaching are coming by way of the unplanned testimonials of the experience of the teachers offers new possibilities for consideration. Then again, while I knew that the book would be recounting the experience and ideas of teachers of literature, I had no particular reason to expect that it would present a selection of writers talking about the teaching of literature. One result of this focus is that explicitly or implicitly, we also find ourselves reflecting on the writing of the writers, on their views of their writing, not only their views of teaching. Incidentally, when I saw the title, Caribbean Writers on Teaching Literature, I took writers to mean creative writers. It doesn't exclusively mean that. There are other kinds of writers in the book, but the significant number of creative writers adds a valuable dimension to the book. The last thing I'd like to say before my little reading is how pleased I am to have been from so long ago related to the editors of this book, Lorna and Thelma, and that in the classroom situation. I praise them, not least for their commitment and perseverance. I'll now read a little bit from my interview. And this was my answer to the question, what would you describe? What would you describe as your style of teaching? And my answer is in relation not to teaching generally, but to teaching in the lecture situation. Well, I suppose for good or ill, one would have to say it's a kind of performative style. In other words, one does not want to make performance distract from substance, but one wants to convey some kind of vibrancy so that every lecture for me is a kind of performance. Although I'm not setting out to perform, I almost invariably get so involved and so caught up about my feelings and about what I'm talking about that it comes out in a way that involves animation and gesture and so on. I also like to keep it at a kind of talking to other people level, not a grand theatrical thing, but a more intimate kind of level. Those are some of the points I would say about my style. On the business of the performance, one of the things that always pulls me up short when I'm lecturing is that I might suddenly realize that, let us say, two young women sitting beside one another are sort of smiling or even giggling. And at first I think that they're not paying attention to me. And then it hits me that what they're amused at is me. I have mixed feelings then, because of course you are glad to know that they are concentrating, but you also wonder if they are being distracted by the performance, so to speak. If they are really paying attention to what I'm saying, I never know, but at least that makes me aware that there's some sort of animation in my style. And the interviewer then says, yes, you have a theater style, really. And I go on, well, I can't really help it. And as I said, when I speak of performance, even if you're not going to be gesticulating or very animated, the truth is, and people wouldn't believe it, but for every single lecture in a class that I've been teaching for 10 weeks or so, I'm keyed up beforehand, just as if I were in a play backstage waiting to go on. I'd be keyed up. It's when I start teaching that I relax. My big fear, whether I'm making a speech or giving a lecture or whatever, what I have to feel before I start is that I do have something to say. That might seem a silly thing to say now, because one always has something to say, but I don't want to say just the routine things. Therefore, until I feel that I have caught that little connection point, that little spark, I don't feel confident. So that sometimes, and this has been a reassurance over the years, I've gone into a lecture when I feel I am not totally unprepared, when I feel I am totally unprepared, not having anything to say. And most times I come out of the lecture feeling on a high that it has gone exceedingly well. And I just like to add lastly something, a detail I inadvertently didn't include in the interview, so it's not in the book, but I'll share it. From time to time in a lecture, I realize when I look at the students in front of me that I'm seeing somebody, usually female, who I'm not aware was in that class or in that lecture group. And then I come to realize that what had happened is that one of the people who belong in the class had brought a friend of hers to hear me lecture. This, as you might understand, was a particularly pleasing thing to note. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Bo. Should have charged them for bringing their friends, but that's lovely. Now, we will have Dr. Brian Heath. He's the retired senior lecturer, staff tutor in drama and head of the Philip Sherlock Center for the Creative Arts at the UWI Mona. He has worked in drama and education in Jamaica for over 40 years and is co-author with Pamela Bowell of Planning Process Drama, Enriching Teaching and Learning, and Putting Process Drama into Action, plus several book chapters, papers, and articles. He's a multiple award-winning theater director of stage productions by the University Players and the Little Theatre Movement of Jamaica's National Pantomime. In 2002, he was awarded the Silver Musgrave Medal by the Institute of Jamaica for his contribution to drama and theater education. He was conference director of the 5th International Drama in Education Research Institute at UWI Mona. And most recently, congratulations, he was a winner of the Caribbean Regional Award in the 2020 Commonwealth Short Story Prize. Dr. Brian Heath.
Thank you, Jean. And just want to begin by saying a hearty congratulations to Lorna and Thelma. As Professor Bo alluded to the length of time it's taken to get into publication, but thank goodness that moment has arrived. I'm going to read a little bit from the book, and the question that was posed to me is one that was posed to several people in the book. And it has to do with when it comes to the formal text, how do you get your students to read? Do you have any problems in any way with them actually reading? Let's take A Doll's House, or even one of your own plays, a Trevor Rohn. Do they read? And of course, immediately I began to think of a moment when Carolyn Allen once asked me to teach a class for her. It was just a 1-hour lecture on Ginger Knight's play Whiplash. And of course, when I got to the room, I mean, I was there ready to talk and discuss the play and everything with them. And not one of the students had read it, none of them. And so I was completely thrown and had to fall back on talking about the context, the political context of the play, so that when they eventually read it, they might understand something about it. But what I'm beginning to realize is that decolonizing the canon is not necessarily going to make it any easier for us to get students to read the texts. We may think that they're more appealing to them because they are our own, but the political landscape of the 1970s to many of our students is just as alien as the political landscape of King Lear. So we still have that challenge about how do we get them to read. Well, of course, they don't read. And that's what the article is about that I've just done for the Caribbean Journal of Education. It's how do you get them to read and study? If you're studying dramatic literature, then you have a specific approach to that. And the thing is that students need to have a reason to read the play. Their basic reason, which is because it's on the syllabus, is not a good enough reason for them to read anything. I always say to the teachers, the first problem you're going to have is that they don't have the book. They haven't bought it. So when are you going to start teaching the text? When the entire class can prove to you that they've bought the book? No, you can't wait that long. There are problems on both sides. There's the problem that the teacher's already taught this book so many times that she's fed up with it anyway. That could be the case. Or that it's brand new to her as well, and she doesn't really feel very confident in teaching it. Then you've got this whole thing of, why should we do Shakespeare? Or why should we even be doing Trevor Rohn? You know, what's the point? So I think that's one of the reasons why I say, look, cut up 2 copies of the book, stick them on cartridge paper and put them on the wall. And then you see the whole play as it is set out. And then it's so important to know the shape and form of the play. Is it 5 acts? Some acts have 7, 8, 9 scenes. Some acts have only 1. A Caribbean play will have 2 acts and maybe 5 or 6 scenes in each, maybe 1, maybe a few more. So what's the basic difference between a scene and an act? If we set up a process drama, we can imagine that we're a company of set designers and we've been asked to submit set designs for this play and nobody has ever read it before. We can ask students to go through and see what the different scenes are. Where is it set? Is it in a castle? Is it in a village? So in an oblique way, they realize that there are so many acts, so many scenes. The scenes seem to shift from Macbeth's castle to the heath, whatever that is. And it's giving them permission to know that it's all right to be ignorant. They don't get that in school. What they get is that it's not all right to be ignorant. It's only all right to know things. And if you don't know things, then you're not in it. So it's teaching from a position of the edge. My professor, Dorothy Heathcote would sit there, then suggestions would start coming, and then she would start edging in. It's what she called edging into the thing, instead of heads down and let's all get with the program. Of course, the thing is that if we're now seeing designers, set designers, we're actually looking at something else. I'm talking to them almost like colleagues now. Well, if it's going to be inside the castle, what do you suggest? Are there some big walls? You know, things like that. But remember that it has to change and it has to open up. So it can't be too solid. And you're arguing about something completely different. But very gradually, somebody will get up and they'll go back to the text and say, well, there's a banquet scene and it says a ghost comes in. And I would say, oh, so we need a ghost effect as well. So you as a teacher are kind of processing the stuff that's coming from them. I always remember John Fiennes was one of Dorothy Heathcote's followers. He was a great teacher himself. He was a history man. And he always said, Dorothy had taught him that if you think you know where your starting point is for teaching, take 2 steps back because you're too far ahead. So I think my idea there of the pretext is a double thing. It's before you engage with the text, but it's also learning about the text on the pretext of doing something else. So that I might not start with scenery, I might start with props. If I've got a load of boys, it might be, how many daggers do we need for this play? Which sounds rather sexist, I know, but anybody who's taught teenage boys, you know, will find that they're very interested in weaponry. For old story time or something like that, you're dealing with the feeling of a country place. What are some of the things that give you the feel of, you know, what's a yabba or a kitchen bitch? A lot of them don't know, but they learn. Or somebody in the room will say, oh yeah, my granny has a kitchen bitch, or something like that. I think that many teachers teach how they are taught, how they were taught. And so there's this paradox in a way that you play at teaching. The real inauthentic behavior is a teacher going in and going through the motions of being a teacher. It's like a go-in role as a teacher when you go into the classroom, and then the kids go into role as learners. And it's a totally inauthentic experience. What drama does is it breaks all of that, and it gives me permission to say, well, I don't know, this place is a complete mystery to me. Now, if a teacher takes that position, then the children look at it and say, yeah, where do you begin with something like this? And you say, well, let's look at the beginning and see where we go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Now we will hear Mr. Samuel Sawyer. He has loved literature all his life, and poetry is his particular passion. He sees each literary work as an adventure and an education to caution, enlighten, encourage, and inspire. He has shared them as a teacher in secondary schools, at Eardiston Teachers Training College in Barbados, the UWI Cave Hill campus, Alabama State University, and in 8 Caribbean countries during the Caribbean Poetry Project, funded by the University of Cambridge, the University of the West Indies, and the Commonwealth Education Trust. In such teaching texts as CXC Revision Guides, The Chrysalids, Stepping Stones Anthology 3, and Connect Students Book 3 and Book 4, he has contributed as author or co-author to helping readers appreciate the riches of language and literature. Samuel Sawyer.
Greetings, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me or see me. If you can, will somebody please click on the reaction button and give me a thumbs up. Thank you very much, Marcia. So I'm going to speak to you, and then near the end, I would like to share my screen. Thank you, Carol. I'm going to share with you some excerpts in answer to one or two questions that I was asked by Lorna and Thelma. I'm going to start first with a response to the question, how do we create interest in literature among students today? And one of my responses was that I believe that the ways of creating deep interest in literature are limited only by our imaginations. We can match the literary works to the very topics that already absorb students. In addition, we can offer students as wide a variety of genres to choose from as possible, because I'm sure in most of our experiences, we know that the spectrum of literary types offered in school tends to be pretty narrow. Thirdly, lots of research confirms that when adults show enthusiasm for reading, this has a positively infectious effect on young people. And of course, we have that marvelous tool that is a consequence of the 21st century technology evolving, that is the internet, which we can also use. Now, secondly, I'd like to share with you some of my responses to the question of how do you actually teach literature? And of course, this is a personal response, not prescriptive, but descriptive. I know that over the years, the way I've taught literature has evolved as I've been exposed to various things and various ways of doing such things. For example, we know that much work has been done by researchers on different learning styles and multiple intelligences, and therefore, as a teacher of literature, I try to capitalize on that. So for example, if I'm teaching a literary work, I will seek audio recordings, CDs, DVDs, the old technology, and now we have, of course, the digital ones on the internet. So for example, when I was teaching Lorna Goodison's The Woman Speaks to the Man Who Has Employed Her Son, I would often introduce the poem to various audiences, readers, and so on by playing them samples from 3 songs or the entire songs if time permitted. These would have been Elvis Presley's In the Ghetto, John King of Barbados's How Many More, and Bob Marley's Johnny Was a Good Man. Why did I do that? Because these 3 songs share the common scenario of a mother grieving over the actual or the anticipated demise of a son because of involvement in a life of crime, which is what Goodison's poem also addresses. In addition to that, I have adapted and or adopted methods of engaging students which I found being used in other fields. One of these is something called a 3-level reading guide. I see that I am not in a position to share my screen with you, so I just have to describe it. Fundamentally, as a teacher, you will construct a kind of worksheet that operates at 3 levels. You give students statements that operate on the literal level, then you give them statements that operate on the inferential level, and finally, you give them statements on the application level. So you ask them to respond to each of these statements by indicating with evidence from the text whether the statement is true or not. And in my experience, I've never had a class of students who was not engaged by this particular teaching tool called a 3-level reading guide. In addition, when we are doing pieces, particularly narrative ones, whether poem, play, or short story, and so following, I've used something called the DRTA method, the Directed Reading Thinking Activity. It's a way of developing the predictive capacities of students by sharing a title, a picture, something like that, and asking them to predict what the text is likely to be about, and then pausing at strategically chosen points during the text itself and asking students to make predictions and reconsider predictions they've made and to share the reasoning for these predictions. So it is pretty difficult for a student, unless the student is the most, indifferent, not to be engaged in a class of literature if you're asking them to think, to predict, and to clarify and to argue and debate periodically during the reading of the text. one of the most powerful tools I've also used is something that I'm sure is familiar to lots of you, and it's called a reader response journal. And this tool comes in a variety of ways. For example, the teacher could pre-select particular observations from the literary work and ask the student to copy these and write a response to them. Of course, the reason for copying is that the textbooks are in Barbados on loan from the government or rental, and therefore students ought not to write in them. But if it's their own text, they can write in the margin or some other place. They could write on sticky notes or sheets of paper and so forth. Now, I share this with you because in Barbados, once every academic year, parents for each level of class, first, second, third, fourth, and so on, are invited to come and chat with the teachers, and they can have their wards, daughters, and sons present at the same time. And I remember distinctly that one evening during a parents' meeting for third formers, a student said to her mother, the reason that I have liked this class so much, is the best class I've ever gone to, is because I get the opportunity to share my opinions on the literary works. And that was as a consequence of my using the reader response journal. And finally, I hope that the host will enable me to do screen sharing, because I really want to share something visual with you. Well, if this is an appropriate point, I'll just describe it to you. There's a poem entitled Atieno, a Freedom Song. And under the influence of what I had read about multiple intelligences based on Howard Gardner's work, I once went into a third form in a high school in Barbados. We were doing the poem because it was one of the texts on the CXC list. Thank you very much for enabling me. Now I'll be able to do screen sharing. And I gave the students several opportunities or options about how they could represent their understanding of this particular poem. And I had them working in groups. And this impacted me tremendously, because one of the people in the group was a boy who was typically not particularly engaged with literature. He never wrote very much. He never participated a great deal in class discussions. But on that particular occasion, he produced what I hope you can see on the screen. If you can see what's on the screen, please say yeah or something like that. If you do a thumbs up, I won't see it now because I'm in screen sharing mode. Will somebody please say yeah?
Yes.
Good. And this is a facsimile, a photo of the artwork that that boy did in collaboration with his classmates to represent the story of Atieno. It's a story basically of child exploitation, child abuse, and child death. So Atieno works very hard from morning into night. So right here at the top where you can see the features and the clothes as opposed to the skeleton on the right-hand side, she's washing the dishes. She's doing lots of housework. She is denied proper clothing. She's treated like Cinderella while the uncle's family are well-dressed. She's sent to the market to purchase groceries. Almost inevitably, she becomes pregnant, and she dies in childbirth. So as you can see, here's a student who has not written very many words. In fact, the only 2 words I can see are fish market. Yet this student demonstrates, because he's been given this opportunity of representing understanding by art, a song grasp of the narrative particular poem. And that's the point at which I'd like to stop. Anything else, you can feel free to engage me in the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samuel Sawyer. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Aisha Spencer. She is a senior lecturer in language and literature education and deputy dean in the Faculty of Humanities and Education at the UWI-Mona. She has been teaching language and literature for over 20 years and has been training prospective and current teachers for the past 13 years. She has also been facilitating course delivery online for tertiary students in the teaching of literature and language since 2005. She's the co-editor of an anthology of Caribbean poetry entitled Give the Ball to the Poet, a new anthology of Caribbean poetry, and has contributed to publications on Caribbean children's literature, Literature, Education, and Post-Colonialism, and female-authored short fiction texts. She is also founder of the No Hiding campaign for secondary school students across the island, where she has hosted island-wide interactive poetry sessions. Dr. Spencer was the recipient of the UWI Guardian Life Excellence in Teaching Award and the UWI Vice Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Teaching. Dr. Aisha T. Spencer.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am thrilled to be here today and to be a part of what I consider to be a huge contribution to the field of literature education. I have fused snippets of my readings and remarks together based on what happened naturally for me as a reader and not simply as a contributor, engaging with and responding to Caribbean writers on teaching literature, edited by Lorna Down and Thelma Baker. My response to this text occurred on multiple levels. I had an academic, professional, and deeply personal set of responses as I interacted with this text. I had the privilege of being taught during my undergraduate and graduate years by many of the interviewees in this book, and I have enjoyed a collegial relationship with some of the others. It is a truly humbling experience when you find yourself being named on a set of pages with those you stood in awe of decades ago. And it opens up for me a deeper understanding of the value of legacy and continuity, particularly in the area of literature and literature education. This is the kind of experience one will have when reading through the interviews in this book. It will bring you into direct contact with literature writers of all kinds, and as a result will provide possibilities for navigating your own experiences with literary texts and literary spaces, both at the same time. That for me is quite a unique and amazing opportunity. Additionally, one of the most significant values attached to this book is the pulling together of past, present, and future in ways and through individuals that will allow the fields of literature and literature education to benefit from theoretical and practical postulations that fuse together for the first time that I am aware of the history of the teaching of literature in the Caribbean or in diasporic spaces with key principles and best practices from Caribbean literature teachers. This is a profound reality because the world of a literature educator can be a very lonely one. Literature in the last 15 years has often been separated from language and literacy and has been given a kind of shadowed presence in our society. We hail our authors, our dramatists, and our poets at various cultural events, but we do not do enough to support and develop the presence of the literary in sustainable ways. Through this publication by Down and Baker, we can trace the dominant patterns or shifts in literature education, and by doing this, establish the crucial role literature plays in the construction of individual and national identities. Likewise, although literature teachers are highly sought after, the demand is high not necessarily because the majority of our secondary schools have placed literature in a central space, but because there are now fewer teachers who are qualified to teach in the area. This could be connected to the decline in the number of qualified literature and literature education graduates from our Caribbean universities and teachers' colleges. This is yet another situation then that points to the cultural and academic relevance of the book whose contents we are here to showcase this afternoon. As is advised by Edward Baugh in this book, to teach literature effectively and respond to literature meaningfully, and I quote, "You have to feel that literature matters." Students have tended to run away from literature, seeing it as a pedestal type subject that is out of their grasp and too difficult for comprehension. Velma Pollard stresses the importance of eliminating this challenge for both teachers and students in her discussion on getting to know the literary aspects of the text and the world of the literary. She says, the more you know about literature, the more you can enjoy it. My use of the word cite, which I'm using now, comes from the reference both authors make in their introduction about their book being, and I quote, a site for readers to listen to the voices of teachers of literature in a way that does not bring the somewhat interfering presence of a mediator. I see this book as a gift to those of us in the Caribbean, in literature education in particular, who were schooled more on literary content than literary pedagogy, and who had to struggle to discover and affirm our own voices of confidence, creativity, and capability during a period of time that has generally had scant publications and focus on Caribbean literary pedagogy. To now have a text which merges conversations on both the literary text and the approaches to how we treat and teach it, when how we teach has become so visible based on our new normalizing of online teaching, is timely and well appreciated. There are three main opportunities that are enabled through the kind of thought and action being offered in this book. These are opportunities for preservation, transformation, and sustainability. The introduction and commentary sections of the text establish the fact that teaching literature is an art. And in conveying this truth, synthesizes the main ideas being offered by all the interviewees, regardless of the differences in the times in which they taught or are still teaching, and the spaces they occupied as part of their experiences with literature and the teaching of literature. By providing a space for each of these voices from different generations, the book promises not simply to preserve a history of teaching literature for those in the Caribbean, but also to transport the ideas and experiences stemming from what each group has shared to language and literature educators globally. This helps to develop an awareness of the similarities and differences with teaching literature to Caribbean students, or when teaching Caribbean literature to non-Caribbean students, as is described by Kelly Baker Joseph in her discussion in the book of the Caribbean as a multiple, complex space that allows for difference, both in literary writings and in literary classroom experiences. The possibility of transformation is embedded in every interview that spans the parameters of this book. This transformation occurs in different ways. There is transformation of the individual, teachers and students, transformation of the approaches to teaching the literary text, and transformation of experiences we have and allow others to have with the text as we evolve as facilitators in the classroom space across all educational levels. Maureen Warner Lewis in the text captures the essence of literature and the role of the facilitator when she states that one of the good things about literature is that it helps you to understand people in the world. Brian Heap speaks of the role of emotional education in drama education and discusses the need to provide students with the chance to put a name on the emotion they are feeling. David Williams engages the reader in a thought-provoking conversation on how literature as a subject produces a set of qualities in the teacher that provides a more personal opportunity for growth in character, as the teacher has to learn to be able to listen and to give assurance to students that their points are valuable. Aisha Spencer, that's me, adds through her interview that students ought to be allowed to access how they are feeling as they respond to both the text and the experience of exploring the text. The issue of how we enable the process of transformation is also tackled in this outstanding publication. Caroline Cooper highlights the importance of being open to timely paradigm shifts in approaches to both course content and course delivery, offering strategic guidance on how to do this, especially at the tertiary level. By providing a charting of the journey of literature teaching in the Caribbean across different time spans and through these different perspectives, Caribbean Writers on Teaching Literature presents a set of detailed, authentic articulations of the processes of teaching and learning literature by Caribbean authors, poets, literary critics, and educators in ways that I believe change the playing field and change the game. By characterizing what Sandra Robinson defines as the pedagogical process, This text engages us with ways of being as facilitators so that we positively impact the experience of our students in literature classrooms. Mervyn Morris speaks of the need to accommodate multiple directions when facilitating processes of reading, interpreting, and response. And Edward Ball highlights a powerful point when he advises that we not allow for situations where students are allowed to erase the text through reading imposed on it. Anne-Marie Wilmot and Sandra Phillips speak of student-centered engagement and the need to pay attention to students' context and to have students surprise themselves through participation in the activities they are given. Samuel Sawyer discusses his belief that if we are to encourage student interest in literature, we then need to begin with a focus on their own interests. Each interviewee, including the two editors themselves, introduces a set of strategies and pedagogical principles for teaching literature and explores the challenges encountered with diverse student populations in their literature classes. Dr. Victor Chang, may he rest in peace, speaks of managing and finding solutions for problems that range from the poor writing skills of students to homophobic responses students have to certain authors and literary texts. Norval Edwards illustrates through practical examples the importance of humanizing the text by humanizing the writer. Lorna Down implores that we enhance the quality of the literary experience through a philosophy and practice of sustainability. And Thelma Baker promotes the use of authentic material, appropriate text selection, and the use of creative exercises as important parts of building students' literary skills. Finally, though in no way exhaustively, there is the opportunity for sustainability. Though this can be connected to preservation, I'm looking at sustainability here as being synonymous with a kind of passing on of the baton. It is bigger than the amazing artifact that this book has already become as an object. It speaks more specifically of the future and the ways in which this book lends itself to real and powerful kinds of interaction about literature pedagogy that will open up avenues for research, interrogations about literature pedagogy, more nuanced observations, better ways of understanding literary spaces, further investigations, and absolutely deeper conversations. I congratulate both Dr. Lorna Down and Ms. Thelma Baker on this fantastic, creative, groundbreaking publication, and I know that it will contribute significantly to the field of literature education, both regionally and internationally. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Spencer. What a comfort that we have generational passion for literature. Thank you. I would like to pause to acknowledge two other contributors who have kindly been on Zoom with us, Dr. Velma Pollard and Professor Emeritus Mervyn Morris. Now, I do have some questions. First, for the authors, what inspired you to write this book? Make a note, please, because there are 3 questions. What did you learn when writing the book? And did the book make you like the subjects more or less? Over to you, Lorna Down and Thelma Baker.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your questions. And perhaps, Thelma, you may want to begin.
Well, the idea for writing came from discussions between us. We exchanged teaching methods and so on, and looking at literature. And then we decided there must be something else to it. Other people are doing other creative things. So we just thought it sprung from that idea and then just grew out of that.
And I'd just like to add that Thelma and I were also joint board of teacher education, external examiners. So we would go into classrooms and observe teachers. And we really wanted to share with them our own ideas about literature that we had been working on, but also ideas about other people in the field, our master teachers, as we call them. And so that was also another reason for the book. We wanted to inspire teachers to enhance their own teaching of literature. In addition, we thought, you know what, if this could function like a group, and if we could have this kind of conversation, so everybody who would read it would actually be part of this ongoing conversation, then that would engender more ideas about the teaching of literature. Okay, thank you. Jean, you had another question for us? I think, yeah, one was about what inspired. What was the other one again?
Did it make you like the subject more or less?
You want me to take
Yeah, you
it?
take it.
Okay, well, for me, when we were actually, the interviews themselves, we found them very, very engaging. And as we reread the interviews and we discussed them between us, it gave us more insight into literature teaching, because here it is. We had so many ideas from so many different teachers of literature, and also from our creative writers, and they were giving us an inside perspective as well. And so, yes, it made us appreciate even more literature. Yes.
Right. And here are some other questions. Have you always wanted to be a writer?
No, not always. More of a teacher. Writing came out of teaching.
Okay.
Well, I think our guests should know that you have won several medals for creative writing, Thelma, in the festival competition. What do you hope your readers take away from this book?
Well, the value of literature, the importance of literature in helping us to be, in helping us to become individuals, in helping us to become more caring of each other, how literature can help us to empathize more fully, walk in another person's shoe, and how through literature we can create the kind of gentler society that we all want. And that, literature really enriches all of us. Then you wanted to add anything? Okay.
Well, there is another question. What were the key challenges you faced when writing this book?
Well, one was whether to keep the interviews as they were or to rewrite as a text in our own words. We had a little tussle with that, but realized that the interviews we had to preserve.
Okay. And there was, of course, a challenge of time and other projects, intervening. So, but for us, it really was such a worthwhile journey that we just thought, we had to preserve the words of some of our teachers as well. I think Aisha hit it on the head when she spoke about the history and the legacy. We wanted to be able to share the legacy of Mervyn Morris and Professor Ball and, and the others. And so for us, it is a gift, really. We saw it as a gift from all these creative people, creative teachers, to our society.
How long did the production of this book take?
Forever.
Yeah, just about.
Okay. Part of the thing is the interviews took quite a while. Perhaps 4 years, or maybe more. Yes.
Because it was put down at some point.
Yeah.
for other things.
And we also wanted to make sure that we had at least a broad enough scope of writers. One of the interesting things is that we have Professor Kelly Baker Josephs, who is Caribbean, but she's part of the diaspora. And, you know, we wanted to widen it to not just have Jamaicans and Caribbean teachers, but also at least one representative from the diaspora. So we were very happy to have Kelly, who represents that aspect, that area.
Yes, a brilliant young woman. Yes.
Yes.
So that is it for our questions and answers. So now we will ask Dr. Lorna Down and Thelma Baker. As usual, they have given us very brief introductions, but I will read them. Lorna Down has taught literature and literature education for sustainable development at the Michael University College, Kingston, Jamaica, and UWI Mona. Her publications include a series of language and literature textbooks. Thelma Baker has taught literature at Merle Grove High School, Kingston, the UWI Mona. Her publications include a series of language and literature textbooks. Both have worked on behalf of the Joint Board of Teacher Education at UWI Mona as external examiners for literature and literature education. Over to you, Lorna and Thelma.
Okay, thank you, Jean. I was just wondering, is Rachel Boxell able to present? I know there was some technical glitch. Or shall we go ahead with the appreciation? Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I get a thumbs up if you're able to hear me? Great. I begin with a quote from Velma Pollard, and she said, "I like to teach literature because I was very well taught literature." I was and remain excited about the publication of this much needed text for two main reasons. Firstly, this text is a kumbla, which contains the giants of Caribbean writing and their experience in delivering the subject. It reveals the other side of lecturers and teachers as the storytellers tell their story in this riveting, honest account of their methodology, successes, and challenges. Further, Pollard's revelation, "I was very well taught literature," speaks to my own experience here at the University of the West Indies, Mona. And I repeatedly state that there is no other university in this world that could have provided me with a degree of such high quality while also making it a truly enjoyable journey. You see, I was taught by almost all the giants in this text, and indeed, I was very well taught literature. Right now, their passion has inspired me to teach, and I am now literally sitting in a classroom with my own students. Secondly, a primary text which speaks to literary pedagogy is indeed unique, engaging, and stimulating. Structurally, the text moves seamlessly across three generations of Caribbean writers, from the elder statesmen and women of the canon who started teaching in the 1960s and 70s, to the second generation storytellers, and finally, to the present day teaching with technology generation of teachers. It would perhaps be easy to comment on each generation following the given organization of the text. However, the interviews ask crucial questions which reveal specific motifs in teaching that transcend time. Thus, the text is a carefully woven tapestry of revelation of the self as a teacher, teaching pedagogy, challenges, weaknesses, and recommendations. I will highlight three main motifs that emerge from all generations. Firstly, our Caribbean writers agree that the teaching learning process must be student-centered. Significantly, the group of pioneers, Ball, Morris, Pollard, and Warner Lewis, emphasized student-centered learning. That is, and I quote, giving students their own voice to discover new insights as central to the teaching learning process. This group shied away from the focus on the lecturer as central to the educational process and replaced it with methodologies that ensured student validation and engagement. Thus, Bose speaks about avoiding theoretical jargon and the performative aspects of his lectures to ensure student engagement, while Morris hones creative skill by having his students think they were having fun and by making the drama present. This focus on student-centered learning, specifically the enjoyment and appreciation and understanding of the discipline, is not lost on the second generation of writers, Baker, Chang, Cooper, Williams, Marquardt, Down, and Heath. Interestingly, this generation adopts a more storytelling and personal approach to the delivery of the literature content, again with the aim of maintaining the student as a central figure. Recognize the growing lack of interest in the subject and unwillingness to read. These writer teachers swim against the tide by sharing strategies which disempower literature as an alien culture and create learning activities that are accessible. Thus, Down emphasizes the workshop seminar approach, which encourages group activities and student presentations to ensure continued interest. Further, the millennials, Edwards, Sawyer, Wilmot, Phillips, Spencer, Robinson, and Baker-Josephs, build on this student-centered approach and move towards treating students as co-learners with the teachers. Thus, Edward admits that there is a need to understand what they know and thus engages with social media to garner this understanding. Significantly, Spencer encourages a need for departure away from the solely lecture styles to teaching students how to enjoy the text. Thus, the millennials do not, and I quote, abandon all methodologies of the past, but rather revise them, end quote. Secondly, our Caribbean writers emphasize that the teaching learning process must be dynamic. There must be new approaches to methodology and a shift in focus of content. Although heavily emphasized in the second generation of writers, this is in no way neglected by the pioneers. Significantly, this generation implements the movement from teaching solely the literature of the empire to incorporating Caribbean literature. The validation of place and culture is especially significant to the second generation of writers who seek to validate not only the student, but also place and culture. Consequently, there is greater emphasis and focus on the landscape, particularly by Williams and Marquardt. Further, Cooper extends this change in focus to include popular culture and engage students by having them recognize that the value of popular culture. Interestingly too, Cooper builds on Warner Lewis's inclusion of courses on orature by creating and implementing courses such as reggae poetry and African diaspora women's literature. Complementing this shift in content comes a more student-driven approach to teaching and learning from the millennials. The writers are conscious of the changing landscape of students. This generation has to be especially creative in how they teach, as Wilmot highlights the fact that they're the instant generation and want to Google everything. Thus, the responses to what are the new pedagogical approaches that we need to take evokes a range of responses. Edwards calls on teachers to humanize the text, that is, bridging the generational gap between teacher and student, while also meeting the students in their technological world. Thus, Edward reveals his reading of social media, and yes, even gossip sites to understand the current creativity of students. Finally, our writers reveal that the teaching learning process must be relevant. The common thread among all generation of writers is interconnectedness, and Chang sums this up when he speaks to the necessity of having students understand that, and I quote, literature raises questions about life which are still valid. Later, Cooper admits trying to bring in current issues helps the students to see the relevance of the text. Thus, the lesson to teachers is that literature is not abstract, but critical to understanding self and society. Our writers also acknowledge the need for diversity in delivery. While people have different learning styles, there are also multiple intelligences. Key aspects of teaching that all Caribbean writers emphasize in each section of this book is that students should enjoy what they learn, and that teaching should make sure that it is stimulating and entertaining. In conclusion, the text covers 3 movements, 3 generations. It focuses on best practices while not ignoring the challenges. The text is not just for the literature teacher, as it transcends the literary classroom and speaks to the universality of teaching. Baker thus reminds teachers to be avid readers, to establish expectations for each other, to go over the rules, to work out ideas and interesting exercises, and importantly, to know your students, develop trust and respect on both sides. Further, this text provokes the question, what will the next generation of stories speak about, and how will we teach it? My criticism of this text: Part 2 was not published at the same time as Part 1. What will that focus be? The 4th generation of teachers, perhaps, teaching in a pandemic? My heartiest congratulations to Dr. Down and Ms. Baker on this well-needed, concise, riveting, and inspiring text. This is a must-have not only for literature teachers, but for all teachers. And as Sawyer states, our starting point is that the teacher must always bring powerful enthusiasm to the classroom. Our gratitude to these esteemed writers for their contributions to this text and their powerful enthusiasm for the delivery of the canon. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And now we ask authors Dr. Lorna Down and Ms. Thelma Baker to give their response and expression of appreciation.
Thank you very much, Jean. Thelma and I Thank you very much, Jean. Thelma and I prepared this, but I'm going to be the one actually reading it. We give thanks for the publication of Caribbean Writers on Teaching Literature. It's truly been a collaborative work. It started as a reflective conversation between Thelma and me on our teaching of literature. It widened to include other friends, colleagues, and our teachers. Our book is indeed a tribute to these contributors, creative thinkers, writers, and master teachers of literature. For section 1, titled The Widening Student-Centered Vision, we thank Professor Edward Ball, Professor Mervyn Morris, Dr. Velma Pollard, and Professor Maureen Warner-Lewis. For section 2, titled People, Place, and Culture, we thank Dr. Victor Chan, Professor Caroline Cooper, Dr. Brian Heeb, Professor Mark McWatt, and Mr. David Williams. For section 3, entitled Millennials, the Global and New Technology, we thank Dr. Norval Edwards, Professor Kelly Baker Josephs, Miss Sharon Phillips, Dr. Sandra Robinson, Mr. Samuel Sawyer, Dr. Aisha Spencer, and Dr. Anne-Marie Wilmot. Thank you for sharing your passion, your expertise in creating rich literary experiences in classrooms and in lecture theatres. We also wish to thank Dr. Marcia Stewart. She was there with us, quietly supporting us as this book took shape, and she produced that excellent foreword. We express thanks too to Miss Sonia Roberts, our main transcriber and a graduate of the Department of Literatures in English. She was our first reviewer. We heard her laughing while she transcribed Victor's interview. And as she transcribed the others, she commented on how very interesting they were. So ladies, thank you both very much. We acknowledge our publishers, the University of the West Indies Press, in particular, Dr. Joseph Powell, Miss Althea Brown, and Miss Siobhan Hearn. Thank you for guiding and facilitating the publication of this book. We're also grateful to the University of the West Indies Press for hosting this launch. We express our gratitude to the marketing and sales team, Miss Donna Muirhead, Miss Karen Smith, Miss Kelly Williams, and the IT officer, UWI Press IT officer, Miss Ajanelle Solomon. Our special thanks go to our program participants, Miss Kelly Williams of the University of the West Indies Press, Dr. Marcia Renford, Director of the School of Education, Dr. Rachel Mosley Wood, the Head of Department of Literatures in English, the contributors to the text who participated, Professor Edward Baugh, Dr. Brian Heap, Mr. Samuel Sawyer, and Dr. Aisha Spencer, for her enthusiastic response to the book as it came out, and for her insightful comments as she delivered the book commentary. We thank Mrs. Rachel Boxill, and for so ably and graciously managing these proceedings, as well as sharing her expertise in this area. We thank Mrs. Jean Laurie Chin. The support of friends is vital in every endeavor. And so we are deeply appreciative of you, our friends. We thank you for your support and your ongoing interest. We thank especially Mrs. Frances Baird for her belief in us and for her continuing encouragement. We are also grateful for our well-wishers and all those in attendance at this launch. Your presence has been vital to its success. And finally, family. Mervyn and Keisha Ann Down, other members of the Down family, the Earl clan, Barbara O'Connor, and other members of the Baker family. We couldn't have done this without you. Thank you. Our hope is that Caribbean Writers on Teaching Literature will help to instill a love and passion for literature, and that you will join the circle of storytellers. May we together find more ways, like literature does, of creating love for people and for place. Thank you all very, very much.
Well said, Lorna and Thelma. I join with Dr. Down and Ms. Baker in thanking our authors, participants, and guests for making this such a fitting launch for a very welcome publication. It is a special joy that we can visit the late beloved Dr. Victor Chang in these pages and still laugh with him, dressed in all red to teach the Scarlet Letter. I posted that on social media, and there were so many expressions of love from his former students. I predict that this book will be translated into many languages to enrich the teacher-student experience. Please remember, there is a special launch discount. The promo code is shared on the UWI Press website. Once again, thank you, Lorna and Thelma, for enriching the teaching experience and recording the unique approaches of some veritable legends in their own right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon, and please stay safe.